I am vehemently opposed to the death penalty. I think it's a barbaric punishment. I don't even consider it to be a punishment. It's just an barbaric act of vengeance. And it has no place in a civilized society. That is my position, and that remains my position. And of course, in an ideal world, Osama bin Laden would have been arrested, would have been subjected to a fair trial, and provided he had been found guilty of all the atrocities that he had always been glad to attribute to himself and his organization, and that he'd been gloating about, provided he'd been found guilty of all those atrocities, he would have spent the rest of his miserable life incarcerated somewhere. But realistically speaking, no matter how piously we might have wanted that to have been the outcome of the last few days, realistically speaking, the guy was barricaded in a fortified building and he was never just going to surrender. So we can argue until we are blue in the face about what actually happened in those 40 or so minutes in that compound that the attack took place. And we can argue that it is likely that, from what we've heard so far, it's quite possible that basically the guy was subjected to a summary execution. And we may piously assert that we are disappointed with that, and that, it is a pity that it had to come to that. But in the end, we also have to acknowledge that this is something that couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, really and truly. And I, for one, am not going to shed a single tear over the demise of this filthy excuse for a human being. So good riddance to bad rubbish is all I've got to say about that. But what I would like you to just consider for a moment, and I'm being a little bit more serious here now, what I would like you to consider is just the way we've responded to this news. And I am as guilty of this myself, because, like I said, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, and I am as elated as everybody else that this vermin finally, got what was coming to him, basically. But we would do right, maybe, to just compare for a moment, take a step back, and compare the sort of responses that greeted the news of what had happened to Osama bin Laden, and just compare them to the way other people greeted the news of what had happened on 9/11. And I will immediately acknowledge the huge differences between the two scenarios. In the one case, we're looking at a targeted attack on one specific person in order to get to him, and in another case, we're looking at a random attack against civilians, people who were just going about their daily business and who were in no way involved in this war that the terrorists who committed 9/11 felt they were engaged in. But we might also consider for a moment that we're dealing with ordinary people who feel that they've been the target of an organization that is, outside their control, that has a certain level of power over them, and that they are powerless to resist, and the frustration that comes with that. Now, as an American citizen, you might have felt this frustration of feeling this threat of terror hanging over you. And as people keep on pointing out, don't by any means live under the delusion that that has in any way diminished by what has happened in the last few days. But as an American, you might have felt frustrated by the feeling of having this threat of terror hanging over you. Equally, the people that responded to what happened on 9/11 have been feeling extremely frustrated by the feeling that they were being used as pawns in a power game executed by the great Satans of Israel and America and so on and so forth. And you must understand the response that those people, the way these people, these ordinary people in the street, responded to what happened in the context of how they've been feeling over years. Look at how the Americans responded, how Americans, ordinary Americans in the street, responded to hearing that this scumbag who has been holding a gun against their heads has been finally been tracked down, and he finally got what was coming to him. The response, the reaction is natural, is understandable. Even if it might be distasteful to some of us, it's understandable. And now maybe might be a good time to take that step back and look at how those ordinary people in Palestine, for example, reacted on the 11th and the 12th of September 2001. As misguided as they may have been, try and just look at the way they were feeling about how they were being treated on the world stage, and what they thought, again, as misguided as they might have been, as they were in my opinion, but how they felt, what they felt the attacks on the 11th of September 2001 symbolized to them. That they were mistaken, that they were misguided, that they did not see what had really happened on that date, that they did not understand that this was a cowardly and a vile attack on innocent people, is one thing. But maybe look at the fact that they are ordinary people and understand why they reacted the way they did. Not justify it. Not say, oh, that is okay then. Just understand. That's all. And just maybe look at them with a little bit more compassion. And that's all I'm asking of you today.